We welcome you all to the next edition of the Checkup Tete-a-tete. At the Checkup, we regularly bring to you exclusive video interviews and podcasts with renowned medical professionals across different fields to give you a glimpse of their lives, careers, and what motivated them to rise high and make a name for themselves. The Checkup is a one of a kind web magazine for healthcare professionals with rich content that has been curated, written, and specially designed for those in the profession. In this edition of the Checkup Tete-a-tete, we have brought to you an interview with one of the country's leading GI surgeons, Dr. Roy Patankar, who is being interviewed by a renowned name in pediatric surgery, Dr. Rajesh Nathani. The Checkup would like to thank Dr. Rajesh Nathani for organizing and conducting this enlightening interview with Dr. Patankar. It's our honor to have you on board, Dr. Nathani.
Hello to all our viewers, and I'm thrilled and honored to interview Dr. Roy Patankar, who is our very special guest for today. It is highly unlikely that you don't know Roy, but just in case you don't know about Roy, Roy is a laparoscopic GI surgeon practicing in the city of Mumbai, where he has his own hospital, Zen Hospital, as well as Joy Hospital. Both are within a stone's throw of each other in the suburb of Chembur. Apart from being an eminent faculty and being invited all over the world and the country for different types of seminars, he himself conducts so many conferences. Uh, he is a very able administrator. Zen and Joy hospitals are one of the most successful hospitals that I have seen and I personally visit. And he also has a very multifaceted personality, very well-rounded, very multifaceted personality, which I have admired over so many years. And it is more than anything, it has been always been a great pleasure to be one of his close friends. I think I can call you that, Roy. And
Must be hard to get the words out of your mouth.
and welcome to the show, Roy. Tell us more
Thank
about
you.
yourself. Tell us more about yourself.
Oh, it's a privilege, Rajesh, for me to be with you, and must be tough for you to get all these words out of your mouth.
Well, all these things have to be done, the show
Yes,
must
I
go
know.
on.
Sometimes you have to
Yes,
take care of the sensibilities as well.
right.
What is there to say? I think I've been externally fortunate to actually have in the position I am. I think God has been kind. Um, I started my life in Mumbai uh, with the proverbial silver spoon, and my father was a chief surgeon at the ESIS MJM Hospital, known for his thoracic surgery in the 70s. And my mother was a practicing gynecologist with a standard Mumbai 15-bed nursing home. Nursing home below, we used to stay on the first floor, typical family. So I think so my life's had a lot of ups and downs, and that I think in many ways has changed or molded my personality. So when I was 15, my father died of ischemic event when he had gone to New York to undergo a CABG. I think in 1980, CABG wasn't common in India, and when he had his infarct, I and my mother accompanied him to New York to get a CABG where he died in a New York hospital. And shortly after that, my mother was diagnosed to have interstitial lung disease, and she died when I was 17, just entered medical college. Me and my brother both fortunately got GS Medical in KM Hospital on merit, and early part of our life was in the hostel at KM. So things have moved on. I think. What more do you want, Rajesh?
Yeah, so, actually, one of the things that I had wanted to talk to you about was this proverbial silver spoon in the mouth. Now, so as compared to the others, definitely you were born with a silver spoon in the mouth. your own place, your own house. And these are big things in a city like Mumbai. However, I have observed over my own practice that there were many people who had similar silver spoons or even golden spoons for that matter. But not much came out of it. As you rightly said, Joy Hospital was a two-storied structure. Uh, and I have been fortunate again to witness how both Joy and you have built it up from that level to a huge multi-specialty hospital. Each and added Zen at the just a few years back, going on to each about 100 and 110 bedded, plus having the topmost specialists in the area and around, and from different parts of the city visiting you regularly. So
That's paying yourself a compliment, is it?
I'm just
Top most specialist in the area.
I'm one of those also rans. So now tell us what it would have been easy to have been complacent, a steady income, steady cases. Why go through the hassle of building it up into a big center?
Well, Rajesh, let me tell you what shaped my thoughts, because my father died when I was in the 10th standard, and mother died when I was in first MBBS first term. So things suddenly became quite difficult for us. We were reasonably stable financially, but we gave our then 25-bed hospital on rent to an orthopedic surgeon, which gives us a fixed rental per month. After Joy finished his orthopedics MS from KEM and I finished my MS general surgery, Joy went off to Canada. And at that time, Rajesh, there was in 1990 was the first lap coli done in the city. I was unable to get anyone in India to train me. They wouldn't even let me watch the lap coli, never mind actually training me. And my only option were to go abroad. There was really not that much money to pay for my own stay abroad and get these fellowships. I applied for 2 or 3 fellowships, one in Bombay Hospital, one to Tata Trusts, and was turned down for both. And again, a matter of destiny, I think. I read a paper in the British Journal of Surgery, I think, in April of 1990, with a series of the first 200 laparoscopic cholecystectomies. I hadn't even seen one in KM. And my then teachers, the head of department, head of unit, both were tremendously anti-laparoscopy. But I think that has been a turning point in my life. I actually wrote to the corresponding author, Mr. Colin Johnson in Southampton, and I explained to him that I wanted to learn laparoscopy, and he was kind enough to say that, come across, I'll arrange a place for you to stay for 3 months, but I can't pay you any money at all. So I remember in those days, we had a fixed deposit of 30,000 rupees, which I broke to actually buy my air ticket, and that was the cheapest ticket available.
That's amazing.
And stayed in Southampton. When I went to Southampton, I realized that unless you have the FRCS, you couldn't get a registration and you couldn't operate. Though Mr. Johnson would let me wash up, he wouldn't let me do anything. So my immediate challenge was to remain on a shoestring budget. I remember that in the afternoon every day for the first 3 months, I only ate chips. Wow. Because that used to cost 30 cents in the hospital cafeteria. So chips and vinegar was lunch every day. I used to have dinner in the cafeteria. That would cost me £1.10. In those days, to me, it was a lot of money. So luckily, Mr. Johnson was quite happy with what I was doing. He put me onto a research project looking at gallbladder function and cholecystokinin. And that at that time in KM, I had zilch as far as research, statistics, methodology. So in that unit, I worked with that guy for 6 years. I passed both my primary and secondary FRCS in Edinburgh, getting a full registration in England. And then he gave me a job as a registrar. So that was an eye-opener, actually, to see the English system and more the technical skill that I gained. Obviously, I learned laparoscopic surgery there. I learned the approach to surgery in England. I think I got out of KM as an unfinished crude product. I was a good technician, but I couldn't analyze, I couldn't think, I couldn't read a paper. I didn't understand statistics. And that, if you ask me, the 5 or 6 years in England really made a technician into a surgeon.
That's very good. Go ahead.
At the end of my 4 years of registrar's post, I was due to come back to England when Colin Johnson said that, why don't you do a PhD? At that time, I said, I'm very clear I want to go back to England, go back to India. I wouldn't want to stay here. So what could a PhD would it do me? So he insisted that I should spend another 2.5 years completing a PhD in surgery, which gave me a lot of insight into way the system works, about writing paper. I had to actually write for grants to various government bodies in England to get my own salary. So that was a great teaching experience. And side by side, I learned a lot of laparoscopic surgery and the clinical approach to surgery, which I think I wasn't well trained in India.
Right. So actually, here we have gone a little ahead of ourselves. Firstly, what made you choose medicine in the first place? And then why surgery? So you have had very illustrious parents. One was your dad was a eminent surgeon, and your mom was a wonderful obstetrician and gynecologist. And I remember even in my own practice, when my own patients and their grandparents visit me, they would say, our children have been delivered by Dr. Patankar. And with great fondness. So who influenced you more? Your dad, your mom? You chose surgery, but were you influenced more by your dad or by your mom?
Oh, definitely by my mother. They're two very different personalities. My dad was, in many ways, even financially irresponsible. He would get a full-time salary. In those days, I remember the salary was 9,500 rupees as a head of department of surgery. And that check would be given to my mother at the end of the month. And he would not bother about finance. He was a man, my brother was very much like him, extremely well-read, erudite, large circle of friends, academically very strong, but pretty hopeless in day-to-day life and finance and entrepreneurship. All that was my mother, who was extremely determined, hardworking. She was the entrepreneur in every which way, and she literally sweat and blood came into building the hospital and the home. They both lived in chawls in their childhood. And after they finished the MD, they actually had to live and work in a mission hospital in Kerala for 6 years to have enough money to even rent a place in Mumbai. So I think in many ways that rubbed off on me. And that in between period of living in a hostel actually gave me the determination that probably in the beginning I would not have had. For me to do medicine was a given because, that was the conversation at the dinner table. And I remember right from the age of 13, I was assisting my mother for hysterectomies and sections in a nursing home.
Wow.
So going into medicine and, by the grace of God, we got into KM on merit. Surgery, I was so influenced in second embrace. Remember by that time, both my parents were dead. But I used to see a lot of his students because many of them had worked with him as a registrar. He used to attend his PG clinics. And I was always fascinated by surgery. I remember in third MBBS, I did my first CLW in KEM casualty. And that kick of doing that large laceration on the man's skull, I decided that this was where I want to be. And fortunately, I was first in general surgery. I had many distinctions. So I think getting surgery, in our days, life was simple. You had good marks in surgery, you would get MS general surgery in your own institution. So it sort of happened by default, and I got into KM in MS general surgery.
That's great. But again, why not obstetrics over surgery?
That kick that I got suturing that man, and I used to assist. After that, there was just no question looking back. It was surgery all the way.
So,
and my brother was doing orthopedics. So the only other thing, it was either orthopedics or general surgery. Since Joy was 2 years ahead of me in KM doing orthopedics, it was a given that I would do general surgery and maybe team together and work together.
Right. So, again, you have had an extremely distinguished academic career, which you have not really highlighted as much. But it would be easier for me to ask the question, which are the distinctions that you missed in your MBBS days?
To be honest, Rajesh, looking back, when my own son and daughter are both in medical school, I think these academic prizes matter very little in the course of your career and your success. I think what really matters, as you mentioned, is to have a good personality, to have great EQ, rather than just academic brilliance. But just for the record, I had all distinctions in first MBBS and all distinctions in second MBBS and 2 distinctions, including surgery in third MBBS. And
Great.
The first rank in MS General Surgery.
Absolutely wonderful. So I completely agree. So, our perspective changes with age. And I quite agree with you that the distinctions don't matter. But these are trophies that must be collected at a certain stage of life. And at that time, it is important. It adds a feather to your cap, and it gives you something to work for. And in the end, of course, you realize that this is just one more thing. I completely agree with you on that. I understand that you had a chance to get a residency, permanent residency in both UK and the US. Something which people would give an arm and a leg for, or even more for most Indians. I know that you refused and came back. What made you do that?
I think in my 5th year in England, I was working as a senior registrar in Southampton, which is a large teaching hospital and a university hospital in Southeast England. And I had one night from 2 to 5 in the morning, I was repairing a elderly lady's ruptured aortic aneurysm. In those days, it was a big surgery. She had come in hypovolemic shock from casualty. She was in OT within 20 minutes, and she actually did well. When this lady came back for a follow-up at 21 days, and she was about to enter my room, I was just at the door. And when she realized that I was Asian, I saw her telling my OPD nurse, "I don't want to be seen by a Paki." In England, Paki is any Asian, whether you're Indian, Bangladeshi, or Pakistani, you're called Paki. And that really was the turning point. I always was a proud man. I would rather be a first-rate citizen in a second-rate country rather than a second-rate citizen in a first-rate country. And I think times have changed. I think we are now increasingly become first-rate citizens in a first-rate country, and England has gone really down. But I have no regrets. I don't think I could ever live a life where someone looked down upon me despite being academically inferior to me. So that was a single important. That day I came home and decided that I was going to go home, whatever the consequences. Whether I made it big in India, I said I would try for 2 years. If I didn't succeed, I would go and work in the Gulf or work in US, because I'd done my US MLE, I'd passed my flex, I'd done a 6-month stint in Seattle. So going to US at that time wasn't too difficult.
Right. So talking of looking like a Paki, I think you look more European than Asian. The light is not.
You don't have to lie, Rajesh. It's okay. I can still buy you a coffee at the end of this interview.
For the people who are looking at this interview, the light he doesn't have very flattering light. But if you look at his other photographs, you will realize the truth of my statement. Now, why I understand about your Joy, you and the other members of the family building up Zen Hospital, Joy Hospital. Why Zen Hospital? Why another?
Initially, when I came back from England, we increased Joy and I increased Joy from a 2-story structure to a 5-story structure, made it into a multi-specialty hospital of 80 beds, and ran it fairly successfully. Now, my life, a second big turning point in my life was the death of Joy in 2007. He was 46 at the time, and it was probably it is like a loss of a parent to me. Because in many ways, we were a good foil. My Joy was like my father. He was a planner. He was a thinker, but a poor man at execution. And I would be perfect in that role of executing, doing the souls on the ground and the sweat and tears. That was like my mother. So we were a great team from that respect. Over time, I realized that I needed to have a bigger and better setup. There were family issues as well, but the tipping point was a lot of my complex surgery and the well-to-do patients. I was operating in Fortis Mulund. And I remember one incident clearly where I had done a Whipple's there, and the patient actually had a leak and with a pancreatic fistula, and subsequently stopped paying the bills. And we had a meeting with Malvinder Singh and now the infamous Shivinder Singh. And in the meeting, people asked about charity and philanthropy. So I actually put up my hand and said, look, is it possible that, our patients who run into trouble and are not able to afford it, please could you consider reducing the bill? And he bluntly told me, the charity will be from your account. Fortis is a public limited company. We are answerable to shareholders. So you please transfer the patient to a government hospital, and we will deduct this money of the bill from the next 3 months' income that you have. So that I realized was, if I really wanted to do work that interested me, without looking at the top line, bottom line all the time, then I would have to have my own setup. I would need to own a tertiary care setup, where I could pretty much do any kind of surgery I wanted without looking at the patient's financial aspect. That was the birth of Zen. Now, you have been partly instrumental in this, Rajesh. And I know from the early days when we decided to buy the place and initially lease it, buy it, it was again providential. I think in 2011, if you remember, there was a real estate crash in Mumbai where many projects were left incomplete and builders ran out of money. So we had this building, one building away from Joy Hospital where I lived and worked. And this project was lying incomplete. It was designed as a IT building. And we initially bought 2 floors out of 7 floors. And nothing happened for 2 years. We had paid the builder a large chunk of money and nothing happened. So we had decided to buy 2 floors and lease 4 floors. And gradually the project restarted in 2013, by which time we had enough capital to take a large loan and buy the entire building. So in many ways, it was destiny. I'm a great believer in destiny and God. And I think somebody was guiding me at that time to make this happen. Otherwise, I didn't have zero family support. This was a single man. I'm a simple Maharashtrian man, Rajesh. So you had no family support. So it was all debt.
I think you're Maharashtrian by birth, but let us not talk about your other aspects. So, so it's very one point which I was going to discuss a little later, but I think I'm glad we can deal with it just now as you brought it up. You are very religious, much more religious than, say, the average doctor. How do you reconcile being a scientist, being a religious person, and being a hard, shrewd, tough business owner?
Rajesh, what do they have in common? There are 3 separate aspects of my personality. And I think being a hospital owner and a GI surgeon must never overlap. These are many mistakes we often make as doctors and hospital owners, where we put your own interest before the organization. And that is something I learned very early. I also learned to grow, I would need a externally good team, maybe take on board and keep with me people who are better than me. And I'm proud to say that many of the guys in Zen are simple stars. I don't mean to flatter you, but you are one of many stars that we have in Zen. You know, I read during the construction of Zen a book by Aziz Premji. And he was asked a question that you are a simple BSc in chemistry. And today Wipro IT has some of the best brains in the world. So he said, my only job as the director and the CMD is to hold on to people who are better than me. So that is, I actually feel that is the most important thing as a hospital owner. Coming on to spirituality, I've always found that there is something in life that has guided me and taken me and shown me the right direction. And I've always been going to Pandharpur, which is my mother's hometown, and I continue doing the Ashadi Wari every year. Many things have taught me. I've had many experiences, good, bad, and ugly, and I'm sure it shapes your personality. As far as science is concerned, I think science and spirituality are on 2 parallel tracks. I publish, I present, and I lay great importance that every resident, a fellow of mine, will publish and present. So I don't think these necessarily have to overlap each other.
Great. So now another aspect which you have already touched, which I wanted to discuss, is your academics. Now, I understand that you had a great background when you were in UK, and you learned the ins and outs of academics, research, etc. But many of our other consultants have done it, who have come back to India, but they have had difficulty in applying the same to their practice back in India. Academics has been sort of an ivory tower, which is very difficult to break into. The guardians have been the full-time practicing doctors, and they have zealously guarded that ivory tower. What were the difficulties you had breaking into it? Now you are, of course, one of the high priests of academics as far as surgery is concerned. So tell us about your journey, because that is also as interesting as practice, as your deal from the barriers entering into it and then going on to becoming a high priest.
So to be honest, Rajesh, my early journey, undergraduation and post-graduation KEM did nothing to prepare me. I had one publication in the Bombay Hospital Journal, which your thesis gets converted to paper, which is really zero value. It's just a case series. When I went to England, I learned the nitty-gritty of research, the null hypothesis, how to set up a study, how to read research, how to understand. I did a 3-month course in statistics as part of my PhD training. And I also realized how it is important as a clinical surgeon to be able to understand academics. And I think that really changed. When I came back to India, that's one thing I was determined that, I keep telling my fellows, don't only become Lakshmi Bhaks, also become Saraswati Bhaks. Because you pursue Saraswati, Lakshmi follows. And I sincerely feel that only 10% in our country actually make an attempt to present, publish, or maintain data. So very early on, I hired somebody who would take photographs of my CT scans, edit my videos, maintain a database. And I'm proud to say that we have published almost 40 publications, out of which about 15 are international publications, and we have multiple book chapters. I also realized that unless you're in teaching, previously, all the academics were supposed to be in teaching hospitals, and people in private practice were said that these guys only make money. They operate and make money. But I really think that doesn't need to be true. I think in private practice, if you have the volumes and if you have the mindset, actually collecting data, presenting, publishing, writing is actually easier when the atmosphere is so much more conducive. It is in the mind. Unless there is a strong motivation, you can't make it happen. Over time, what I realized in Zen was there is so much I can do alone. I needed fellows, I needed residents. So I first got ourselves inspected by the Maharashtra University of Health Sciences and started the country's first fellowship in colorectal surgery. It began with writing a curriculum for the university in colorectal surgery, then getting this established. And even now, there are only 2 centers in Maharashtra which run this fellowship. We also do a fellowship in minimal access surgery. The next step was to get onto the National Board of Examinations, and we now have a fellow of the National Board in Minimal Access Surgery, and we have just got inspected for a PhD program in GI surgery with the Datta Meghe Institute. So I think having these fellows, students, actually keeps you on your toes. You go for rounds, there are young boys who are on Google who have got the most recent evidence or reading the most recent Cochrane data and questioning you. I think there is a Sanskrit saying, Vidya Dhyanena Vardhane. Knowledge given is knowledge multiplied. And I firmly believe that my growth has been because of the great team that I've built around me.
Wonderful. Now, you also mentioned the Wari. I'll take it as an opportunity to deal with the various social work, various types of social work that you have done. I know that you have donated a whole GI set. Apart from that, you go to the Wari every year, organize a medical camp, and actually take care with your own hands of the various wounds that these poor farmers have on their feet, sort of bathing their feet almost, that's Krishna and Sudama style. So tell us more about your social work.
I think in life, you and me carry 3 balls. We are like jugglers with 3 balls. One ball is our professional life. The second ball is your social life. And the third is your personal life at home. And it's inevitable that one ball goes higher in the air. The other 2 balls don't go as much. I think getting the right balance is extremely difficult. And many times we realize the rights and the wrongs only in hindsight. So from childhood, our family was into social work, and there is, for the non-Maharashtrian viewers, there is something called Wari. Wari means in July every year, pilgrims walk from Alandi in Pune district, a distance of 240 kilometers in 17 days to go to Pandharpur. And history goes it that Naneshwar would lead, and this is your way of atoning for your sins. Like the Christians have Lent. Similarly, the Vaishnavas have this. So I used to see these people going in the Wari, and I used to, get a VIP pass and go and do darshan. And in those days, one incident struck me is we call them not saints, but the Dindi Chalaks, they call them. He told me there is a Marathi saying, which I'm going to tell you just to make you understand. Jeka ranzale ganzale tani manesho apale tui deva manawa. Means the man who looks after a person who's worshipping me is God. So I realized that taking a VIP pass and doing a backdoor darshan of Pandharpur in the midst of a crowd isn't necessary. God is in the numbers. He's in the crowd of 8 lakh people who walk on the road without slippers, not eating well, but their devotion is absolutely astonishing. And the last couple of years, I've been taking my children with me just to keep their feet on the ground. Because this is where true devotion is seen, not sitting in ivory towers and driving air-conditioned vehicles like we do. Apart from this, I had exposure to Dr. Prakash Amte. I think, again, some viewers may not know him. He's a fantastic social worker who is a man who's a postgraduate from Government Medical College Nagpur, who works in a Nakshal-infested district of Gadchiroli, about 300 kilometers from Nagpur. And the people in this area are the Bhil-Gons. They are tribals, very poor. And surprisingly, they have a very high incidence of alcoholic liver disease. There is no mobile network for the last 80 kilometers near Hemal Kasa, where Dr. Prakash Amte works. So whenever they used to have these Bhil-Gons coming there with hematemesis, and these used to be 18, 24, 30-year-olds, they would die of hematemesis because they would not know Marathi, they would have no money. The nearest hospital is 150 kilometers, that is Chandrapur. So I realized that endoscopy had to be provided there. What I did was, Digant Amte, Dr. Prakash Amte's son, who was an MBBS, came and stayed with us in Zen for a month, and we taught him diagnostic upper GI endoscopy, and we arranged for a Olympus upper GI video scope to be given to them. Now what he does is, he does a diagnostic endoscopy and on broadband sends the video to us for us to analyze, to report for him. And the only mobile tower in Gadchiroli district is in their campus, because that's the only one the Nakshals don't blow up. There are no other mobile towers in that area. So, these have to a large extent shaped my personality, just to see how, people live, the underprivileged live. And I'm glad actually I didn't live in England with all the experiences that I've had.
Wonderful. Yeah. So you mentioned the personal ball. So one of the balls that doesn't rise. So I know for a fact that that's one of the balls that really has not risen too much as far as you're concerned. You have been, I think, doubly, triply, infinitesimally blessed with the most wonderful person as your spouse. Vaishali is outstanding person, and I know that your children are extremely well grounded. It would have been easy for them to walk with their heads well above the skies and look down upon others, but I know for a fact that they are wonderful. So everybody says that behind every successful man there's a wonderful woman, etc., etc. In your case, I don't think it's mere lip service. Tell us more about Vaishali and how much she has supported you and your own kids, and what are you looking for them?
So if you ask me, one of my main regrets in life is I didn't spend enough time with my children when they were growing up. And I didn't give enough time to my wife because I was so damn ambitious in my professional life. I have absolutely no two things about it. And I'm certain a large part of my growth and success is because of Vaishali. We had an arranged marriage after I came back from England. In fact, this seeing girls, and I was very, perturbed by this concept that you had to see somebody for half an hour. But, she was the first person I met through a common friend who was another pediatrician. My father-in-law also is a pediatrician, Dr. Amdekar. And I said, anyway, it's a gamble. It's a good family. She's a nice girl. So let's go for it. And God, again, has been extraordinarily kind. She has completely taken over all the responsibilities of the family and the social commitments. I have had very little to do in the growing up of my children and to making them what they are today. And I would say more than 50% of my success is because of her youth support from behind, quietly behind the scenes working, taking care of things. So I could really, I virtually spend 45 weekends a year outside the city. And the weekends in the city are usually because of a local commitment in some meeting. So I think she's really been outstanding, and I actually owe a great deal to her for my success.
So you have not given due importance to her due to her help, which in running the administration. I think she does a huge amount of work in the admin of the hospital also. So without Vaishali, I don't think Roy would achieve even 1/10 of what he has achieved. Though he would like to.
Question.
Yes.
No, I have no doubt. So we have very clear Chinese walls which we never interfere. Like she would take care of HR and housekeeping completely, where I look after finance and clinical planning. So these are two finite areas which we never interfere into each other's domain. We keep each other informed. But is that time? You're telling me time is up,
No, no, no.
Rajesh?
Please go ahead. This is fascinating conversation. Please go ahead.
So we never interfere in each other's domains, and that's probably the reason why it has worked well. But I really feel that 70% of the running of Zen Hospital is because of her.
So great. Now, the last two things that I would like to discuss. One, this interview is being held in COVID times. How has it affected you as a hospital owner? I know that you have given all of Joy Hospital free to the Municipal Corporation of Bombay to run as a COVID center. So another example of your philanthropy. Uh, how has it affected Zen Hospital? What challenges you see further ahead? And what do you propose to do about it?
So there are challenges on a personal level because my interests are basically endoscopy and laparoscopic surgery, both of which are considered as very high risk aerosol procedures. The second part of it is Roy, the hospital owner. Now, we have been much less affected as compared to other hospitals because our occupancies have been consistently reasonable. Very early on, we decided that we would have one floor as an untested floor. So every new patient admitted to Zen, we kept on one floor. We COVID test every single patient. The second policy decision we took at the end of March was that every staff in the hospital would have a PPE given to him every day. And secondly, I bought a comprehensive Mediclaim policy to everyone, including my contractor employees. So about 300 people we insured because we had to sort of instill a feeling of confidence in them that we would look after them in the worst case situation. So for many things, I think if you're open with them, you're honest with them, and you show some empathy, I think most people will stand by you in these times of crisis. As far as endoscopy and laparoscopy, we have done many innovations, many jugards, but that's not the scope of this interview. But we have been doing a reasonable amount of work laparoscopically and endoscopically through this crisis.
Right. So now, what if you had to? You said one of your regrets was not spending enough time. Any other regrets, or something you would have done differently if you had to restart all over again?
I would have perhaps worked in Tata Memorial for a couple of years. Because I think for any surgeon to be completely rounded off, he must spend time in a high volume oncology center like Tata Memorial. That as far as my advice to young surgeons is don't start practice till you are completely rounded. Because once you're in practice, your professional technical growth is limited to workshops and conferences. So spend an extra time doing that extra year of residency in a high volume center, in a specialist center before you go in. Otherwise, then you are a small frog in a big pond.
So you have almost.
My other regret.
Sorry, go ahead. Other regret.
My other regret, which COVID has partly compensated for, is the time for the last couple of months I've spent with my wife and children. So I always jokingly tell her that this is, been a godsend for them. Now they are forced to spend time with me whether they like it or not. So my daughter may not like it completely, but that's the way it is.
Right. So you have preempted almost all my things, all my points which I wanted to discuss. One of them was, what advice would you give a young medical professional about to start off life? So that is one aspect. That is a technical aspect. Practicing today, or the way we started practice, was completely different. The scenario has changed completely, with a lot of corporates coming in. And for a young person who may not have trained abroad, or who does not have a very special skill set, it is a challenge just to survive. What is your advice to them? And secondly, what would you advise a person who is already established medical professional, who finds himself increasingly sidelined and edged out by the way practice is unfurling in all of India?
So two parts to your question. The first part is, if you are a young resident who just finished his MS in general surgery or any post-graduation, please don't be in a hurry to start practice. Believe me, that extra few years you spend after your post-graduation will last you a lifetime. Today, honestly, you don't need to go abroad to acquire specialist training. There are wonderful high volume tertiary care centers. Go and work in these meccas of surgery, be it at low cost or no cost, but this is an investment you make in your career. The second thing is, no surgeon or postgraduate person starves. So please don't cut corners early in your career, which will shape your personality, and there is no going back. It's the thin end of the wedge. You just sink deeper and deeper in the abyss that you're digging for yourself. If you're an existing person, I always feel that as a looking at people around me, every doctor starts has an ascent, because you start almost at zero in your residency. You have a pretty start ascent in the first 5 years, then you plateau till you're about 45, 48, and only 10% of people have a late upswing. The others after 45, 50 will decline for various reasons. It may be your motivation goes away, health reasons come in, your children are settled, the financial drive isn't there. But if you look at this 10% of people who have a late upswing, invariably these are the leaders. These are people who have invested their time in academics to upgrading your skill set. I'll give you an example. There is a 58-year-old lady surgeon who comes and spends every Thursday with me in Amravati. I'm so impressed. Along with her, there is a 56-year-old surgeon from Ratnagiri. I won't take their names, but they sit in a train overnight from Amravati and Ratnagiri, travel overnight, spend the whole of Thursday assisting me for all my cases, travel back the same night. Now, this is a person who is bound to succeed. Age has got nothing to do with it. It is your motivation to improve. I keep telling these young fellows who work with me, be professionally unsatisfied. Be personally satisfied. Be happy with what God has given you. Because after some time, you can't spend the money you earn. But be professionally unsatisfied. Keep learning, keep trying new things. Otherwise, then life is boring. Try new surgeries, go to YouTube, attend meetings, look at workshops, and keep improving myself. And I hope that my epitaph will say, this is a man who never stopped trying.
Okay.
That's a big laugh, Rajesh.
I think I'll reserve my comments there. And I thank you very much, Roy, for taking the time off. Actually, this was the best and most opportune moment. And our founder, Dr. Santosh Karmarkar, was after me to set up this interview. He knew how difficult it would be to get hold of Roy. I was trying to get it into a professional setup with a professional videographer, but it's very difficult given the difficulty in traveling, and so we have done it over Zoom. However, I think we should be happy with the quality. And again, I thank you on behalf of the Checkup team for having spent your time. And any final words of any pearls of wisdom that to leave us with?
You've had enough of them, I think, in the course of the last half an hour. But
yes.
Thank you, Rajesh. It's been a pleasure as always. And thank you, Santosh and Team Checkup. For I think you have to be. First thing I asked Rajesh when he volunteered to interview is, I said, you are interviewed when you are past it, when you're a photo on the wall, when you finished your career. And I hope he doesn't think that I'm beyond my prime, on the decline, that I am now at the stage where I want to be interviewed.
So yes, in fact, again, something which I wanted to say. Normally, you invite people for these lifetime interviews, as a swan song, their last hurrah. But Roy has a lot of juice going in for him. I know that his mind is continuously busy, and I'm sure he has planned his moves for the next 10 years. Thank you again, Roy, for taking the time off. Yeah, pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rajesh.
Bye.
Bye.
Until next time, with another tete-a-tete by The Checkup. See you guys soon.